Hi everyone, welcome to Talis Founder Spotlight Series. We're excited to have Doron Meyassed today, founder and CEO of the Plum Guide. We're going to hear a bit about Plum Guide's mission, the vision, what's the big idea, how the company has weathered the global pandemic and all the current bits and pieces. But we're also going to chat a little bit to Doron about his journey as a founder and CEO and personal habits and personally how he copes with it and any wisdom that he can share about his journey and generally how to cope with it. Doron is a serial entrepreneur. He's very exciting entrepreneur in an exciting space with Airbnb and other travel companies, obviously being very hot stocks on the stock market. Doron is doing something slightly different, but we think much more exciting and much more curated. At the same time, very scalable, which is the area of curation at scale, which we really like. And so, with further ado, hi Doron, great to have you on the show. Would you like to say a couple of words about yourself, your background? How did you get to found the Plum Guide? What did you do before? And bits about Plum Guide's vision.
Yeah, great to be here, Matthias. And thanks for the nice intro. Yeah, so I'm Doron. I'm not really sure where I'm from. My family is from Israel, but we moved country every 3 years when I was a kid. So lived in Mexico and Switzerland, and just a constant change of school and environment. Prior to Plum, probably my career highlight was founding this company called Promise Communities. And we used to build still do actually, private online communities for brands that they would use to collaborate with customers, with staff, with experts to solve challenges. And our clients were Google and Twitter and Spotify and a lot of hospitality brands, Hilton, Jumeirah, One and Only. And that's where a lot of the passion for hospitality also developed. We sold the business to Omnicom. It was an incredible journey. It was really my first experience of both building a digital product and sort of learning, how do you build community? How do you get experts, creatives, designers to give hours and hours of their time for free, which was my passion for the 7 or 8 years when I did that. And for the last almost 5 years, I've been working on Plum.
And what's your vision for Plum? I said a little bit, it's curation at scale. It's playing in the area of like Airbnb plays a little bit, but it's quite different. How do you describe it, and what's your vision for it?
Yeah, look, at the highest sort of level, and maybe in the simplest term, I'd say that our vision, our real long-term vision, is to solve the paradox of choice in travel. Travel is a very interesting space. I mean, the average customer agonizes over choosing their hotel, their home. If you want to know stats, for example, the average person spends 20 hours choosing a home. These are not 20 hours of joy and fantasy and exploration. They are 20 hours of arguments and stress and anxieties. And the crazy thing is that 9 out of 10 times people report feeling an element of disappointment with their stay. They have a feeling that they could have done better. And that at its core is what we want to solve. We would like that experience to take, if you like, 20 minutes, not 20 hours. And for the customer to be left with a sensation every time that there couldn't have been a better option for them. For us, that's the end goal. For us, it's the number one problem in travel. It's crazy how important travel is in our lives. Will be even more as we're allowed to do it now. And yet to feel disappointed 9 out of 10 times is just wrong. And really, the way we're doing it is by perfecting one process in particular, one thing in particular, and that is sort of very meticulous curation at scale. And in a very high level, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to open a city, a town, or a village, and within 12 to 18 months, vet every single home available in that town, city, or village, and accept the top 1% at 3 different price points, at a medium, at a high, and at a luxury price point. And so if you're one of our customers, if we're in that location, no ifs, no buts, these are the best homes there. And that sort of removes the anxiety of choosing, and removes that disappointment which comes with the inevitable lottery that is booking a holiday home. So it's kind of the high level of what we're trying to do. If it's interesting, I could talk about the scaling element, but that's the kind of the big direction.
Yeah, what is the scaling element? What is the secret sauce, or if it's maybe not the secret one, but how do you scale that? Because obviously it sounds amazing from the consumer point of view. How does one scale that?
Yeah, look, it's been a kind of always on journey for us. I think the thing we're saying is the first year and a half or two of Plum were really dedicated to just figure out how to create a curation process that outperformed the customer. Because really the first challenge was the customers out there reading reviews, filtering themselves. We need to create a process that out delivers that. That, I think, would, to really get to a point where we did that, took almost 2 years, where our NPS is 3 to 5x higher, depend on the city, than what it would be on the familiar platforms when the customer does it. The next stage was making it affordable and scalable. The two core elements there for that has been automation and using this community approach. On the automation front, I mean, today, almost at a click of a button, if we decide to launch a location, Ibiza, Miami, we have a database of all the homes in that location with contact details that are automatically marketed to where people apply. So it's really been automated. And the second chunk is using the community approach. I mean, the most expensive part of what we do is that we send a critic to the home, someone who goes and tests the home. They show up with an iPad app, they test it. That is affordable because we're doing it through a global community of people who do it for passion more than anything else. And it's not full-time staff on your books. It's not anything like that. And we're using some of what we learned at Promise, the previous business, to build these global communities. And the team that used to build communities there for Google and Twitter and the brands we spoke about is here building these global communities who are doing it in a far more scalable and cost-effective way.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned passion in there, and I think obviously I know you for a few years, even from your previous business, and the passion is, I think, very important part of anyone's success story. And I know I remember before you started Plum, we had a chat once when you had 3 potential businesses that you're going to start next, and the 2 other ones, you're like, well, I know I can do this really well. This will be really successful. It's kind of a no-brainer for me. Then you were like, I really want to do this Plum Guide because I'm so passionate about it. I think it's going to be huge. And you were so passionate about it. And you almost, you knew that it might be the riskiest in terms of, because no one has done this before. But the passion there was really, I think, your deciding factor.
Yeah, definitely. Go on.
Do you still have the passion for the industry, even though now you've been working in it quite a lot?
Incredibly so. I mean, I have a deep passion for travel. I love traveling. I have a deep passion for interior design. And if I ever, become too engrossed in the numbers and forget what we're doing, all it will take is for me to spend 4 days in a Plum home to remember what it does to me. Because you get to have a fantasy, you get to play. You show up in New York, you show up in Palm Springs, and you get to live someone else's life for 4 days. A movie director, an economist, a restaurateur, and it's beautifully designed, and it's something you could never imagine doing. And immediately I'm reminded of how much I love what I do, and what a fun and interesting space it is.
It's really interesting as well, this kind of going to homes rather than hotels for the fantasy of interior design, almost like fantasizing, if I could buy this property, what would I do? Or if I had a property in Palm Springs, what would it look like? And what would I do, maybe do differently? Which is quite interesting, goes hand in hand with the whole Gen Z and maybe millennials who are later and later able to afford to buy houses, especially the houses of their dreams. And it's more and more rental kind of economy. Quite a lot of them, they don't have the other chance than this to experience homes, even for a short period of time. Um,
100%, 100%. I think that's very well put. And I think it applies to everyone from Gen Z to actually, very wealthy individuals, because interestingly, something about the economics of this is that you can afford to stay in a place for 5 days that you cannot afford to buy. I mean, the places I stay in for 5 days, I cannot afford to buy anytime, not even near it. And so there's something about the economics there which makes it possible. And yeah, it's a real, yeah, it's nice.
let's talk about COVID. Um, Obviously, in most of the technology companies, whichever sector they're in, there has been some acceleration, either all of their business model or change of their business model or acceleration of what their customer adoption looked like. What did COVID do to you? Obviously, you're in the travel sector, so I'm not asking about what it do to you in the short term, but what it do to the product thinking, um, positioning going forward? Do you think that what has accelerated maybe on the product? What do you think looks different than it looked a year ago for the customer and consumers, and what are you guys doing different?
Yeah, okay. So look, I mean, there's no question that COVID hit us hard. It's, like you said, before the pandemic, we were 100% urban, 89% international, like the two biggest hit part of the travel sector. Um, uh, so when it happened, beyond stabilizing the business and capitalizing and so on, the first thing we kind of looked at and asked ourselves is, do we think that COVID changes the rules of the game in some way, either advantageous or not too Plum? And the positive thing of what COVID has done, if you could say that, for Plum is, I do believe that it makes our proposition fundamentally more appealing in the post-COVID world. And the reason is that as we go out, first of all, people are expected to stay much longer when they go and stay in places. Our average length of stay is 2.5 times longer for the same homes on Plum than, say, Airbnb, similar ratio to Booking.com. And I think that's because when people go for longer, they're more risk averse. They want to know the floor plan of the house. They want to know that it's been tested, that it's not going to disappoint. They don't want to play that lottery. And so I think post-COVID, we will see people much more interested in curated experiences, and not taking big risks, not with what they're doing, and also looking for unique experiences. It's, you're going to feel like, oh my God, I get to do this. And who knows when I will get to do it again. So actually, I want a beautifully designed home. So I think it puts quality assurance, curation, homes over hotels in a very, very strong position. So in that sense, it plays in our favor. What we did spend our time doing during COVID, it really changed two things about the business fundamentally. The first was, so we really kind of asked ourselves, what could we work on? What should we be doing that would make us think that COVID was the best thing to have happened to Plum? And we really came up with two things. The first was, can we use this time to really figure out how to hyperscale supply? And we set ourselves a goal of reducing the cost of acquiring supply by near 80% and tripling the velocity at which we do it. We are part way through working through that goal, but have made a lot of progress and are certainly at the second half of achieving it. We've completely, we put every engineer, every marketeer on that problem away from demand. I really believe that we will look back and think that was a gift, because the business now is unrecognizable from that point of view. And the second big thing we worked on was opening holiday destinations. We were purely urban. Everything we did was around mega cities. It felt to us safe to, in the world where COVID could continue for a long time, be present in those holiday domestic destinations. And we had to do a lot of work to open them. Our test for testing the homes looks different in a place by the beach than it does in a city. The way you recruit the critics and the drive they need to make and how you allocate them on polygons and all of that. So we had to figure all that out. I'm sort of proud to say that the cohort of domestic homes we've launched, they are outperforming every cohort we have ever launched as a business with much lower resource. So I think it's really, really worked. But those are the two big fundamental changes for us since it.
And they're such amazing homes. I keep
Thanks.
getting them on Instagram, etc. Some of those in some of the desert homes in US and remote ones in UK and other places. There's some incredible houses, right?
Yeah, it's some serious house envy out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, let's chat quickly about your team. Hiring is obviously often or always one of the biggest challenges for startups because startups are growing very fast and so finding talent can be tough. Making sure that the talent works really well together can be tough and is tough. And you're a CEO, that's probably an area that you have to spend, if not the most, definitely very significant amount of time. So, what's your any tips or anything that you think, and what does the team look like, and what's your approach to hiring as you scale?
I mean, look, it's an always learning process. I would say, look, some of the things that come to mind to say. I mean, I think there's some things that are universal, and there's some things that change during scale. For me, the thing that really changes during scale is when you go from day one as you scale. Is I think the importance early on are hustlers who are generalists, people who can take any problem, figure it out, not overthink it, and just run and conquer the mountain or the hill, if you like. Um, uh, and the further up the journey you go, the more you want subject matter experts who have worked in this vertical, who have done it before. And for me, the trickiest thing, and we've got it right, we've got it really wrong, but is dialing that up at the right speed. Um, uh, and dialing down the hustlers at the right speed, because even when you get big and the generalists, experts come to add more value, the generalists bring a magic and energy and impatience that you really don't want to lose. So that for me has always been the key. And there's some universal things that are very important to me personally. I'm obsessed with clear communicators. For me, it's one of the most important things. People who have unreasonably high standards and are unreasonable about what they want to achieve. For me, it's very important people who are kind and can talk openly about what's happening. You can have a meta level chat and say, okay, this is what's happening here. We're struggling with this interaction. But honestly, I remember doing this course once, which was once we sold our previous business to Omnicom. They kind of sent people to Harvard for do a week, and there was a course around recruiting, and they sort of asked everyone to think about, I feel sort of conscious mentioning this, but to think about the last 100 people they hired and put them into a bucket of like superstars, okay, was a mistake. And the average for this group was a third, a third, a third. And it did make me think, oh, this is like nearing flipping a coin, this whole thing. So, here are people who are in their 50s, have been doing it for years, super experienced. So I think to some degree, it's as much about knowing to call a mistake and move and making something about it.
Mm. Yeah, I can confirm the clear communication and open communication. It's very important to you.
Yeah.
I have been on the receiving end of that a couple of times.
No.
I can confirm that.
Hopefully not in too bad a way.
I'm going to ask you a couple of personal questions in terms of, what is your daily routine? What's your typical morning routine? I have to say you're one of the hardest working people I know. I know that, I have shared a building with you, with the office, and I know you come sometimes very, very early, and I know you're there sometimes, or on Sundays. What is your routine?
Look, my routine. I'm definitely a morning person. I wake up like 5:30 most mornings. I've never had a good idea after midday, so I kind of wake up. I try to go for a run 2-3 times a week, and then usually I'm working or at my desk by 7:30. And I try to have kind of deep thinking or deep work time for the first 3-4 hours of the day, and then usually meetings, and try to wrap up. I think at a normal time. I think the bit that I've often been told is kind of quirky about the way I work in my routine is that I have this very OCD planning process on Fridays, and I spend probably an hour and a half every Friday doing it. And I really step back and I go, what are the 3 things that if I make happen next week will make me, punch the air in excitement? And then I figure out what those are, and then I break them into manageable tasks, and I figure out how long they're going to take me, and it's a guesstimate, and I will put them into my diary. And then I will usually have to go back and cancel lots of meetings and requests that have been made of me. And it has pluses and minuses doing that. But one of the things it has allowed me to do is to prioritize the world rather than let it prioritize me. And sometimes it's a problem, but it sort of allowed me to do that. Yeah, that works for me.
I can see you going to publish a book after the Plum Guide, right?
As long as someone else writes it for me, for sure.
And what about, I mean, obviously founders notoriously find it hard to switch off from work. Can you, and how do you unwind?
I notoriously find it hard to switch off. I cry in the baths most nights. No, that's not true. Sometimes it's true. No, I really struggle with it, actually. I don't know. I can tell you bits and bobs that work for me, but it's a permanent quest. The few of the things that I do religiously is that I do a kind of digital Sabbath. Like on a Friday night, I'll arrive home. Before I enter the house, I will go on the settings of my phone and I will put all the emails off, and I will turn all the notifications off, and I don't look at any emails for 36 hours or any notifications or anything. I find that really helps me. I do love baths. I find it's one of the few places where I process everything and like everything stops. I don't know. One thing, I'm conscious we don't have a lot of time, but one thing that may be interesting for people, I think one of the things that I find helps me de-stress or reduce a level of stress around something is negative visualization. I don't know if that's a formal term for it. And I when I tell people about it, they say it sounds counterintuitive, but when there's a situation that really is causing me anxiety or stress, I play out in my head the worst possible scenario. And I really picture it. If the worst possible scenario is Plum going under, I picture telling people about it, and I picture the worst of the worst. And I find that immediately within 10 minutes of doing that closed eye visualization, I feel better, and I'm able to tackle the challenge from a much more free and positive place. Because I think the fear of something is so much worse than the thing itself. And when it's untangible, it kind of blows into something that's filling you with stress. And when you start to picture it, it immediately becomes, just the problem that you want to play with and experiment with.
We never talked about this, but I do exactly the same thing. And most of the time, I'm just got like, what's the worst that can happen? And it's really not, it's not the end of the world. And it's and you just, if you just think about it and think about it hard, as you say, you visualize it. I also think about it, and then I'm like, well, that's life. I mean, what is the worst that can happen? I think the visualization is quite good because you kind of, you stop fearing it because you kind of already lived it a little bit or thought about it a little bit more.
Exactly. That's interesting that you do it too, actually. I've rarely meet people who do it. I mean, yeah, I think, my analogy, and I don't know if you connect with this, but my analogy is like, for me, doing Plum, for example, is a roller coaster. And I love roller coasters. But for some reason, I spend a proportion of my time not with my hands in the air, like, having a ride, but like this. And I find nothing makes me unclench and let go more than doing what we just said, like visualizing, picture, and you're like, this is still the ride. It's just like relax. It's just doing the bit.
That's maybe because it's a roller coaster that you are building yourself. If I had to build my own roller coaster, I would also be quite worried, probably.
It's safe. It rattles, but it's safe.
Hey, thank you so much. We're out of time, but I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for thoughtful advice and opening up about your routines and Plum, etc. Always pleasure to talk to you, and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for continuing to support us with so much passion and love. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks, Doron.
Cheers.